Most people know the town that they grew up in. Do they know how the history of the town or how it came to be? Well, for most Grant County citizens, we have more history in one town than most. In 1864, the town was called Sandy Springs, Arkansas, but today it is called Leola, Arkansas. The name was changed to Leola in memory of a girl who died in a house fire in 1905. Her name was Alicia Leola Cunningham. During the 1920s, the population, approximately 500 citizens, and community leaders expected Leola to surpass the county seat, Sheridan, Grant County, in size, but Sheridan had 695 citizens. By the 1913s, the town had 2 sawmills, 2 Stephen mills, a planing mill, a bank, a high school, 2 churches, a hotel, 12 stores, a cotton mill, a grease mill, a handle factory, and a hub factory. Around the same time, a cannery was established to preserve local grown tomatoes. The town also had a movie theater, a photo studio, and a barber shop. In 1864, the Camden Expedition, part of the Red River Campaign, under the commandment of General Frederick Steele, marched up this very same road. Today, it passes through present-day Grant County and Dallas County.
Okay, it was April 1864, close to the end of the war, but the Union Army had marched through to Camden on the Red River Campaign, and they were coming back up, going to try to get to Little Rock. Well, when they got to just outside, just south of Leola, which was then Sandy Springs, some of the Confederates caught up with them. They had a little skirmish, not much, but they marched on, and the town of Sandy Springs just filled up with people from both sides. A lot of people joined the Confederate Army as they came through, just joined up to fight. The Union Army went along Cox Creek, followed the banks of Cox Creek to the Saline River, trying to get to the Saline River to cross, go to Little Rock. Well, April 29th, it started raining, and it rained, and it rained, and it rained, and it flooded everywhere. It was muck and mire and water standing, and the armies were trying to get through. And when they got to the riverbank, and it was right about down there, there was a ferry that had been operated by the Jenkins family. And it was actually my husband's great-great-great-grandfather, Thomas Jenkins, that owned this land. And then his sons took over the ferry operation after he had died and his wife was still living. But they cut the ferry loose rather than help the Union Army get across. But the Union Army had brought a pontoon bridge, which they set up right down there where the ferry used to be. So hard that they were keeping them from crossing the bridge for a long time. And it was raining, and it was horrible conditions. The Union Army had a few more men than the Confederate Army did, and there ended up being heavy casualties on both sides because the conditions were so bad for the fight. But there was a colored brigade, as they used to call them, that was here for the Union Army, and they fought valiantly because they were trying to get revenge for what had happened at Poison Springs. At Poison Springs, most of the colored troops had been viciously killed off, even when they surrendered. So when several of the Confederates surrendered, they were killed. But the fighting went on. There were different generals here, E. Kirby Smith and Rice and different ones. And when they crossed they eventually did make it across. The Union Army did make it across on the pontoon bridge and were able to escape with heavy casualties, with having to burn a lot of their wagons. As they had traveled through, they had picked up former slaves and taken them with them, and there were some of the slave babies that were just abandoned out here. And legend says that there was a local family called the McElroys that took a couple of them in and raised them as their own. But the Union Army escaped, eventually got to Little Rock with a little bit of the troops, so they are given credit for winning the battle, although there was heavy losses on both sides. Wasn't much of a win for either side, wouldn't have been. But it was terrible conditions, and it was a really, really bad fight for a long time, a couple of days. It was the first time that President Abraham Lincoln had recognized the colored, as they were called, soldiers, and it was in that fight at Jenkins Ferry. But it was quite a fight with a lot of casualties, and went on for a couple of days in the pouring rain and water everywhere. But the Union did make it across eventually, a remnant of them, and escaped to Little Rock.
Former site of the Cannonball House, as most people call it. The Cannonball House stood promptly right back there, and that's why there's a gate here that marks the Cannonball House. The stories and legends have it that as soldiers were brought in off the battlefield, they was cutting and doing surgery and stuff like that, and as they cut bones and limbs off, they just chunked it out the window. We're standing on the muddy banks of the Saline River, approximately where the ferry crossing was in 1864. The mud today is not like it was back in 1864. The mud back in 1864 would have been in ankle-deep water. In 1864, the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission completed the dam across Cox Creek near Leola, creating in Cox Creek Lake. In the late summer of 1921, Winter Syndicate drilled down over 1,920 feet in the Leola area. The Bottom Oil Company planned to drill oil fields in Leola too. However, no oil was discovered. The International Paper Company acquired Wilson's sawmill in 1974. The International Paper Company Leola Lumber Mill was bought by West Fraser Timber Company around 2007. In 2017, West Fraser was the third largest mill in the United States, and Arkansas is the fifth producer in the United States of lumber. The Leola Missionary Baptist Church is over 100 years old, and one of the original buildings still stands today. you.